Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father J. Friedel.
Well, good morning and welcome back for another Sunday of Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad you've joined us this morning, and we are happy to continue our conversation about how to make our hometown a place that is infused with care for each other, and especially for those of us who are people of faith, okay? This morning I'm going to actually doing the show by myself because we were supposed to have a guest, and that guest had some family issues and was unable to come and record. So I want to send out some, for all of us who pray for each other, just that we always keep doing that as a part of our approach. This morning, I'm going to be talking a little bit then about, because I've been pushed by some folks to do this, to talk a little bit more about the sexual abuse scandal. A couple weeks ago, we had a program where we were recording on that, and somebody wanted me to go to a little bit more into depth. So we're going to do that right after this break. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, so stick around and we'll go there if you so desire.
Everyone on board dreamed of a new life in America. The Sisters of Mercy had a different dream: to serve all who had need. From the first hospital Sister Frances Ward built to the world's first virtual care center, we continue to answer the same call: to bring mercy home to you. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy. A new baby changes the world and each of us. The Sisters of Mercy devoted themselves to offering exceptional maternity and delivery care, training generations of nurses to do the same. Mercy continues to answer the same call: to not only care for your baby, but to cherish them too. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with me for another Sunday morning. This is actually only the second show in our 3 seasons of doing the show that I'm going to do by myself. It's usually, I think, probably more interesting for you to have somebody to talk with me rather than just hearing me talk by myself. But this is one of those shows that, again, people have given me some input and say, we don't think enough has been said yet, you need to say a little bit more. So I'm going to try to do that today. I will tell you that if you like this format, or whatever, or if you come up with other ideas for shows, please, let us know. And you can do that over our Facebook page, and we'll flash that up here, and we'll try to do that again at the end of the show. Always give us input or feedback because it is important to us that we are developing shows. The other thing I will mention is that there are folks out there who think that they would make good guests for our show. Please again contact us and let us know, because then we can try to respond to you and maybe try to see what it is that you'd like to add to our weekly conversations about faith in our hometown. So whether you're an agency that does good work here in the area, whether you are a church that you don't think anybody knows anything about, let's talk about how we're the same or how we're different, and let's just talk about how we can be good neighbors to one another here in our hometown. Again, what I really would like to talk about this morning, well, I really don't want to talk about it, but I am going to talk about it, is the continuing explosion of all this discussion about the sexual abuse scandal. I did a show a couple of weeks ago with one of my parishioners, and we were on that night trying to discuss all the different emotional reactions we had. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to really try to help us to see, and again, answer some of the questions that a lot of people don't get a chance to ask, but that I've been asked multiple times. So it says, well, why why does this happen in a place like the church? That would be one of the first questions. And again, sadly, it shouldn't, but it has. I would love to tell you that all this was, that it didn't happen within the church, but of course it has. And so one of the things I think we need to recognize is the fact that this goes on in every church, sadly. It goes on in way too many households and families. It goes on, and it has been going on for centuries. And until we continue to up our game, and until we continue to make sexual abuse more in the awareness of people, it's going to continue to happen. Sadly, there are people out there who are sick who will commit crimes against children or against vulnerable adults. That is a sad reality in our lives. And like I say, I wish I could swear to you that it didn't happen in the church, but of course it has. I do think that we need to not kid ourselves, that it happens in schools. Obviously, it's happened again recently here in our own area, where again, cases were brought against, educators. I think it happens certainly in families. It's always a sad thing when we find out a child's been abused in their own home by their own family members. But unfortunately, it's one of the crimes and the problems of humanity that we do not treat people with all the dignity and the respect that they deserve. And any time someone uses someone else for their own needs, and especially when it happens in terms of sexual matters, it's always lamentable. And of course, when it happens with a child or a vulnerable adult, it's also a crime. When it happens with someone who's entrusted to someone else's care, whenever there's a power differential, whenever any of those things exist, we've got something that should not be happening, and unfortunately sometimes does. And until we continue to keep saying to ourselves and doing our best to make sure that we will not tolerate it and that we will stand for it no more, we're going to continue to have it crop up here and there. I would like to hope that our vigilance and our preparedness and our dedication to making sure that it doesn't happen would make sure that it doesn't happen again. But unfortunately, all of our policies and all of our procedures and all of those things can, again, only do so much. And we've just got to make sure that every single one of us is committed to making sure that child sexual abuse is eradicated from everywhere. And I will tell you this morning, again, what we're trying to do with that in the church. Now, people will say, well, how did this even happen in the church? Why did this blow up again? Because did not, you guys have this scandal several years ago? Yes, 2002. It's been scandalous long before then. Let me just admit that. There are cases that go back many, many years. And of course, there are cases in the world where it's gone back even farther than that we don't have any records of. Part of the scandal of Pennsylvania was, in 2002, the bishops made a kind of a contract with all of the Catholics in America. And the sad part is that, unfortunately, like every other organization or every other institution, we kind of policed ourselves. And if somebody wasn't going to file suit or if someone wasn't going to prosecute, we went ahead and policed ourselves and thought we had the situations fixed. And, we tried to make restitution to families and some of those kinds of things, but not always. Sometimes people just did the absolute wrong thing. They ignored the victims. They ignored the claims of abuse. They swept it under the rug. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't understand what was happening. And even though I think we've sadly come a long way at understanding what the phenomenon is, we didn't know that before, but it still didn't make it right that people weren't listening and paying any attention. So some people in the past swept it under the rug. Some people just denied it. People stonewalled. They tried to stonewall when people would sue because, again, everybody was saying, oh, if there's if this has happened before, we're going to be more liable. Well, sadly, it had happened before. And then this is, again, the scandal in Pennsylvania was, even though in 2002, the bishops made this contract on the Charter for Protection of Youth, with the Catholics in the United States, and really, in fact, with all law enforcement at that point in time, not everybody came clean with all the stuff that we still knew about prior to 2002. Now, what's interesting, even in all the Pennsylvania blow-up, all those cases that were reported, the hundreds and hundreds of cases, Only 2 of those cases have been since 2002. And those cases have been dealt with properly. They were reported immediately. All those things were turned over to law enforcement the way they should have been. And so those were nothing new, in terms of. So when you look at that vast preponderance of cases that, of course, were prior to 2002, not that it makes it any better, but notice that only 2 of those cases, which again says to us our increasing vigilance and our understanding of the problem, and many within the church and many within our society, many within law enforcement, the media, civil courts, I mean, all those things, everybody said, we recognize that this was a problem and we needed to make some changes, all right? So now, since 2002, I will tell you what the church does. When we have someone who comes forward, we immediately call the prosecuting attorney wherever it happens, and we say to the prosecutor, we want to turn this over to you. We want you to make a determination as to what needs to happen or move forward from this point. Frankly, it probably never should have happened that church was allowed to police itself. Much the same way no school district should police itself, no family in some way should police itself when it comes to somebody being abused, a crime against children. All that used to happen, in families. Everybody'd say, well, we're not gonna, Uncle so-and-so, crazy Uncle Tom, touched our kid, but we're not gonna turn it over to the police, but we're just not gonna let our kids be around crazy Uncle Tom. Was that the right thing to do? Well, probably not, but it happened. Same thing happened in, school districts years and years and years ago. Well, we don't want the scandal, so we're going to quietly let the teacher go. We're going to do our thing. Should that have ever happened? No. It should have been turned over to the prosecutor, same way that all those family matters should have been turned over to the prosecutor. All the ones in the church should have been handed over to the prosecutors. We've been doing that since 2002, hopefully without fail. Now, again, when there are cases where where bishops have not kept their agreements with the American people and with the people of God, and people in general, they need to be held accountable. So since 2002, things have been cleaned up a lot. We now have a process for everything. But prior to things that happened in 2002, if some of those things were in the file, and there were confidentiality agreements, there were things that were there, those things stayed in people's files. I can say with pretty good, with pretty good authority and with pretty good security that I think that most of our things here in southern Missouri, at least, our diocese runs the southern third of the state of Missouri, most of our stuff that we're aware of has all been brought out into the open, because we've even had people coming forward in some of the most notorious cases with claims from 50 plus years ago. And every time that happens, we have a protocol that we follow, not fire. We turn it over to the prosecutor, even though it was 50 years ago. The prosecutor goes, I can't do anything with this, but thank you, okay. When it's a credible allegation like that, and we know that many of the ones that we've received in recent years are, because again, we've seen the pattern, we know all those things happened. We believe all the folks that have come forward and said something to us. If it were something new, of course, we'd turn it over to the prosecutor, let law enforcement do their thing. We'd immediately suspend the priest, let law enforcement do their thing, and from there. Now, we're gonna have to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm gonna pick up with there about the process that we take. But this is Faith in Our Hometown. If you wanna keep listening to all this, stay tuned.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with us after that short break. So the protocol is that when we find out something happens, we immediately turn it over to the prosecutor. The law enforcement begins the investigation. We do not. We do our own internal investigation as well, but we will cooperate with the civil authorities in terms of however they want to do that. Then the case is turned over to our review board. The review board is a group of people that the bishop uses to advise him. It's made up of law enforcement officials. It's made up of people who know the legal process, made up of people who know, former police folks, social workers, people who have expertise in this area. I unfortunately am the priest that sits on that for our own diocese, because we also have to have one of those on there again to make sure that everybody's receiving fair process and due process, and so that that nobody feels like anybody's being railroaded or anything. Once the review board looks at it, we then also offer counseling and help to anybody who's ever been harmed at the hands of the church. I think that with the recent offers from the Attorney General's office here in the state of Missouri to help us review our files and to comb through them, I will tell you that early in August, the bishop, because of other things that were going on in the diocese, has said, I don't know what's in all the files. Let's just hire somebody who, a forensic person who used to work for the FBI or something. Let's hire somebody to come in and do our files so that we're not ever surprised by anything that's in them. And the review board said, attaboy, way to go, Bishop. Yes, this is a great idea. Let's do it. Because we just wanted to make sure that we're not going to be surprised by anything that might happen in there. We want everybody to look at our processes. And at this point in time, with the Attorney General's office stepping in to do that for all the dioceses in the state of Missouri, and you're going to see other states follow suit after what, of course, happened in Pennsylvania, we don't really think that we're going to have that much more. Once the report's out, we'll find out whether there was anything hidden in the file. But we think we really pretty much know what was in the file. And we will, again, continue to safeguard, folks who ask to be protected. We think we already know most of the folks who were harmed at the hands of the church, and we stand ready to continue to assist those people. I will say again publicly, two things, and these are what I said to my own congregations here, both at St. Peter's in Joplin, Sacred Heart in Webb City, and St. Anne's in Carthage. And all the priests have made similar kind of statements, but mine was, there are two things. First of all, I want you to hear again somebody who wears this say, I'm sorry. I know I've not abused any minors. I know that I've not abused anybody under my care. But some of my wicked stepbrothers, and usually I use that term affectionately, but in this time I really mean it. Some of my stepbrothers, my brother priest did things that were wicked, and we need to continue to say we're sorry for anyone who was ever harmed at the hands of somebody who works for the church. Now, again, priests are not the only ones who have ever done this within the context of the church. But whoever it's happened with, the church was involved. The church needs to help. The church needs to make restitution. The church needs to assist our brothers and sisters who've been harmed. And so, first of all, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry to all of you that all this stuff gets dragged out in the open, but not that it's gotten dragged out in the open, that was a misstatement, okay? I'm sorry that you all got to get dragged through it again because we didn't do enough diligence of just ripping the whole scab off and cleaning out the ick that's underneath. And that's exactly what happened in the Pennsylvania thing. I think we're going to feel pretty secure that our policies and procedures have been in place and in such a way that I think after the Attorney General's report is finished, I think that the people are going to have confidence in the way that we've handled those here in Southern Missouri. But that apology needs to keep coming in some ways because we're going to have to continue to apologize even to people who were harmed 50 years ago. If they've never told their story, they need to be apologized to because it never should have happened. The second thing is that I think that we all have to do, and this is what I also said to my folks, is that we've got to make sure that we recommit ourselves to all of our policies and all of our procedures, that we're doing all that we can to make sure that any of our young people are not in harm's way. And that means following all of what I think are very good policies and procedures that are in place. But it can't just be the priests that are watching to make sure the policies are in place. Every single one of our employees, every one of our volunteers, every single person in every Catholic parish needs to be more aware of this reality of child sexual abuse and that it is a crime and that we've got to make sure that we eradicate it wherever we find it, whether it's in families' homes, whether it's in our church situations. It's insidious, it's evil, and it needs to be routed out and gotten rid of. And so we can only do that if we continue to, as I say, up our game and follow all of our policies and procedures, which means that things like nobody gets access to the kids until they've done training, okay? And we do training. We belong to a consortium of trainers across the United States called Virtus. Virtus has been doing this training since 1979, so we were aware of it and trying to work on it since even 1979, not just 2002, because we were becoming more and more aware of the phenomenon that it had occurred, and many dioceses were trying to take a proactive stance of how to make this change in the church and make the church safer. So everybody does the training. We do the Virtus training. The Virtus training is awful because you listen to predators and how they work their way into families and situations and churches and how they did their thing. So you're trained into what to look for. You're trained as to, why we, so the first part is recognizing the issue and figuring out what the phenomenon is, and then talking about how people have worked their way into the system. The second part of the training is how do we create a stronger safety net so that fewer and fewer predators get through our safety net and at our kids. We do that by all of us following the same rules all the time and with no exceptions. So like, for example, this sounds simple, but no one's ever alone with a kid. Okay, now that sounds very simple, but that means that we've got to do all kinds of things. Confessional doors are never locked. I would never take a kid into a private place in the rectory unless there were other adults around or unless their parents were around. There's no reason for it, and so we do those things, and so we just have to do that. No exceptions, no questions. And not just priests, but anybody who works with our kids. So all of our youth ministers, we've always got to have at least 2 of them there. There's never going to be a single youth minister alone with a kid ever again. If they are, they're not going to have their job very long. Because what we know is, not only does it take a sick person to do this, but it also takes opportunity. And what our training is designed to do is to take away as many possibilities and all the opportunity, so that if they never have an opportunity to get at our kids, then nothing can happen in that regard. So if a youth group parent comes and picks up the second to last kid, that youth group parent, if one of the other ones has to stay until the other parent comes. Those are the kinds of things that we no longer can be lax about. There's no longer any guessing about. We just have to follow our own procedures. So we do the training. The training is designed to get us to do that. So then we all have these rules that we need to follow. We have a code of conduct that we ask everybody to sign, not just once, but every year, because we have to tweak the code of conduct because other things are thought of. These are things like we don't use, sexualized language around kids, that we don't ever, if we're doing youth group trips or whatever, we never share a bed with a kid. If we are working with kids, we would never show anyone anything, there are rules about how to use the internet and how not to use the internet, and what are the protections that we have to have in place there with social media and those kinds of things, And nobody's supposed to be, having private conversations with me on, on texts or whatever, unless the parents are involved and the parents know. Okay, those are the kinds of things that are in our procedures and our policies to follow. So again, what we try to do is we try to do all the training, make sure everybody has background checks, make sure that everybody's trained, make sure that nobody, unless they've been checked out, has access to our kids or any of our vulnerable adults. And then once we have all that screening done, which again doesn't always save us from anything, but once we've done all that screening, we screen our seminarians, we screen any priests that are coming in from somewhere else to work. We just cannot let down in terms of our policies and our screening procedures. But I'll never forget a few years ago when I was working, when we were doing our annual audit, working with the FBI lady, and this tough old FBI lady looks at me and she says, "Well, you're in charge of the seminarians," which I'm not anymore, but I was at the time. And she says, "So what do you think all that screening and all that stuff does?" And I said, "Well, I mean, it shows we've done due diligence, but I mean, they could also be lying on all that stuff." She goes, "Absolutely." She said, "So what else do you do?" I said, "Well, basically we put them in all these situations and watch them like a hawk. Do they follow the rules like everybody else? Do they think that the rules don't apply to them? If they do, they're not going to be around very long. How do we do some of those things?" And so we are making sure that we've got them in lots of situations where we're all watched. And again, this is what I tell my parents when they come to the training. We're not suspecting anyone, but I think we've all got to come to a new place and a new reality in the church where we all look at each other with a healthy suspicion if we don't follow our rules and if we don't follow all of them together all the time and do our thing. So that's what we're doing. I could say more about the things. I think that after we finish with the Attorney General's report in Missouri, after they help us go through our files and do those things, I think that people have good reason to be to have confidence in the things that we've put in place. And the other thing we have to do is, again, as people of God, we've got to live holier lives, pure and simple. Not just priests, but every person who belongs and is a member of the church. If we live holier lives and we don't allow some of the sinful situations or even these criminal situations to get into our lives, the church is going to be a whole lot healthier. We have been talking about child sexual abuse, and I thank God that this program is almost over. But come back. We're going to come right after this Mercy Minute, and we'll wrap things up for a morning.
I have arthritis in my knees, and it was just excruciating. I wish I would have done something sooner. I found myself not able to go up and down stairs, which is bad because we realized we were going to have to sell our house. We decided just to take the worst one first, and we did. I was back to work in 6 weeks. 6 months later, I had surgery on the second one, and I'm back to work in 5 weeks. And I was a little scared, a little apprehensive, even though I knew everything that was going to happen. But I was just impressed. Life is short, and I waited. I think I waited too long.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with me this morning. It's an unpleasant topic. I hate to talk about it, but obviously we need to talk about it, especially when some of these things happen. Some people say, well, Father, the church is getting a black eye. And I'm just like, well, if we had never done anything wrong, they wouldn't be able to give us a black eye. We did some things wrong, and we need to fix it. And people need to be able to trust their bishops. And they need to be able to trust that the church is following the right procedures and protocols. And there needs to be transparency. There needs to be accountability. We need to do all those things, and we need to do them regularly and consistently and not worry about how we're going to look. If we've done something wrong, then we just need to step forward and we need to admit it and we need to fix it. This is where we are. And again, I'm doing this because the Catholic Church is under the microscope right now, but all of us can fall under the microscope, families, churches, whoever. Join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. God bless you, and thanks for a good Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.